Hey guys, it's Top 5 Wednesday. Top 5 Wednesday time, and Top 5 Wednesday is a Goodreads group created by Ginger Reads Laney and Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, and is currently hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. And each month, each Wednesday of each month, there is a topic that of course is good, is book related, and sometimes it's like indirect, it's not exactly book related, but it's indirectly book related. Like it's not directly about books, but it can relate to books in some way. And you pick your top 5 of that particular topic. By the way, I'm in my PJs because I want to get this filmed now, even though as I'm filming this, it's not actually Wednesday. But just in case I get called in, because I work in a job where I could potentially get called in to work, even though I'm not on schedule. So I'm filming, and I want to get this filmed now. And we just got home a couple hours ago, So this week's topic is your top 5 favorite mashups, and as usual, this is in no particular order. By the way, if you are interested in doing a Goodreads, if you're interested in participating in Top 5 Wednesday, I have a link to the group in the Dropbox below. Okay, so like I said, it's your top 5 favorite mashups, and also, like I said, this is in no particular order. This is just how they came to me. Okay, so the first one I said was, well, I've said this in this list. I've kind of said this twice, but just a different version of it. A different variation. So the first one is top 5 historical fantasy and historical fiction, particularly the 19th and 18th century. Like, actually, I'm currently reading a book like that, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norwell. But I just like the idea of, like, you see lots of historical fiction all the time, but I really find it interesting when you throw magic into it. And I'm not, like I said, I'm talking 18th and 19th century. I'm not talking, because you see that all the time, like stories like the King Arthur Merlin story, where it's set in the medieval period, where magic is in like the medieval period, or even the show Merlin, for instance, not the Merlin miniseries with Sam Neill and Miranda Richardson, but the TV series on, I think it was on Sci-Fi, with Colin Morgan, I think his name is, and Katie McGrath, and I can't remember who played Arthur, but it's like when Arthur and Merlin are teenagers. But anyway, you see that all the time. I want to see more stories that are set in, like I said, 18th or 19th century, like 1900s, early 20th century, where we have magic thrown in there. Like I said, I'm currently reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norwell, which has been really good so far. And actually, this, like I said, this also refers to the third one I put on this. I think. The next one. Which, let me go ahead and talk about that one. The next mashup I like the idea of is Western and magic. Fantasy. The Old West and fantasy. Like, the Gunslinger, the Dark Tower series, I love that concept. Now, I've only read the first 3 books, and I still haven't got very far. I don't remember all the stuff that happened in the first book, so I almost feel like I might have to reread the first 3 books. But then the thing is, again, with that kind of writing style, it's sometime in that kind of setting. As much as I love it, it's almost easier to watch it in a movie or TV show. And actually, ironically, I've not seen the Dark Tower movie yet. But, which I think they should have made it into a miniseries instead of a miniseries or TV series on Sci-Fi. I think that would be better. But I personally, the idea of the Old West mixed with magic, I think is a really cool concept. Because, you already have, there was a movie that you have Old West and mixed with steampunk, and Old West mixed with science fiction via the third Back to the Future movie, and then Wild Wild West was kind of steampunkish. And the Westworld, I think, kind of is like that too. So I would like to see more fantasy stories with the Old West. I think that would be so cool to see, like, cowboys and Native Americans dealing with magic. I mean, it's perfect actually for Native Americans because they're a very spiritual race. If I'm assuming correctly, I think they were very spiritual people. So I think throwing the magic into a story set during that time period, like during the Old West, would be perfect. Okay, so the next one, as usual, I'm looking at my Word document that I have of my top 5. Okay, so next, number 3, magical realism and hard-hitting topics. I like the idea of, or even paranormal and supernatural with hard-hitting topics. That's why I love Buffy the Vampire series and the show Supernatural, because they do deal with hard-hitting topics. I know people that aren't into this, like, I'm sure my dad and my mom are probably thinking it's just silly and fun, but both Buffy and Supernatural deal with these important issues that young adults and teenagers go through, like all the pressures and all these emotional conflicts. And they do have episodes that deal with, hard-hitting issues through a supernatural lens, which I think is really cool. And I want to see that more in books. Not the contemporary stuff, which I'm sure are great, but I see that all the time in contemporary, contemporary is, I already lived through what happens in contemporary books. I mean, not exactly, but, it's not escapism for me when I read contemporary, which I have read some, especially ever since I joined BookTube, and people are constantly raving about certain YA contemporary books. Now, of course, I will read what adult books that would probably be considered contemporary, but not the adult ones, because that's not escapism for me. And plus, it's easier to relate to teen, even though I'm not a teen, it is easier to relate to them when we're dealing with fantasy, which I know is kind of ironic because I don't live that kind of life. I don't live a fantasy life. But I really like when they find a creative way to really look at important issues and hard-hitting issues. It makes it, it's easier to understand it, to explain it when it's not thrown in your face and directly told, this is an important issue, this is wrong, this is, this we need to talk about. Like, it's, I feel like it can be thrown in your face sometimes and forced down your throat, but if it has like if it's told through a fantastical element or like a fantasy, then yeah, I think it's a little bit less in your face, because it's disguised with fantasy elements, with like metaphors that are fantastical. And I really like that. Okay, that was number 3. Now, number 4 mashup I really love seeing is in books is historical fiction in general. I really love, particularly historical fiction that deals with an actual historical event, or historical figure, not just historical fiction that's set in a certain time period where a made-up character dealt through something, is where an author puts a fictional character in a real setting. I'm talking, I just recently read The Trader's Wife, which is about Benedict Arnold's wife, his second wife, actually. And I love how it mixes fact and fiction. It definitely makes me really interested in the topic and the historical figure. It makes me wonder what is fact and what is fiction about this person's life. And it makes it more accessible to me. It's a good starting point. That's why I really I think the whole Hamilton musical idea was really brilliant on Lin-Manuel Miranda's part. because it took actual historical events and an actual historical figure and turned it into something fun and accessible and easy to understand, and not like it's not like reading a textbook where because unfortunately, yes, textbooks are kind of boring because it's just stating the facts. It's not told in a creative way. I mean, yeah, they can put pictures and images in there, but still, it's not the most exciting thing to read. So I think, telling about factual events, real life events, and talking about a historical figure, telling their story through a narrative, through fiction, makes it more interesting, makes it more fun. And you learn more, you pay attention more. Now, of course, historical fiction is not everybody's cup of tea. There are people that just can't get into it because, they don't like history, period, and they just, even if it's told in a fun way, it's not necessarily fun for them because they just don't care, which is fine. But for me, I love that mashup, where they take facts and mix it with fiction. And, they tell a story where it's based on truth, but of course there are things that are exaggerated, and there are things that weren't necessarily true. Like I recently, like I said, The Traitor's Wife, for instance, Hamilton the musical. I haven't seen the actual show, but I downloaded the soundtrack on my iPod. I'm trying to think of what other because I've read quite a few historical fictions. I remember years ago when I used to read those Dear America books, and there was one story about a girl that was on Titanic. So it was kind of like the movie Titanic, and how she was a survivor, and it's her diary of the events and stuff like that. I can't think of any other examples, but I think I've read quite a few historical fictions. Salt of the Sea, like British Sepetys books, Salt of the Sea. Although no, that's not an example because those characters, that's not what I was talking about. I wasn't actually talking about characters that are fictional characters that are thrown into a historical event necessarily. Well, I guess, yeah, I am. Scratch that. Yeah, I am. So, Salt of the Sea and, Between Shades of Grey, both of those, I really love those. And like I said, I just love when they mix fact and fiction with a historical figure and historical event. I think that's a really awesome mashup if you love historical fiction. Okay, so number 5, the last one is historical thrillers. I am not a big fan of obviously fantasy and historical fiction are my two of my two favorite genres. My top 2. But I love when, like, I'm not a huge thriller fan. I mean, I've read some thrillers, especially this past year. Like, I read The Dark Half, which is a thriller by Stephen King. I read what is it called? I can't remember. I can remember it yesterday because I practiced what I'm gonna say in these videos out loud to myself. But I remember it yesterday. The Vanishing Game. That's another one I don't know if that was an adult. Actually, I think that was more of a YA thriller. And I almost bought last week. In a Dark Wood. I almost bought it. But I'm just very particular about thrillers, because thrillers to me are, like, they're all kind of the same. They have the same basic structure. So I really like the combination of historical thrillers. Like, I'm currently reading The Jazzbird, which takes place in the 20s. Which is actually based on real events. About this famous lawyer / bootlegger. His name escapes me at the moment. And he is being convicted of killing his second wife. And so that's basically all I have so far. Like, he's going to court, he wants to be his own lawyer, but another lawyer doesn't think it's a good idea, and they're trying to talk him out of it, and we're getting flashbacks to when, because the one guy's like reading the diary of his wife, Imogene, his second wife, the victim, and learning about how she and the guy met. Oh, Remus, George Remus, that's his name. And like I said, it's based on true story. So I was, it was one of these things where I saw it at the used bookstore. I was like, what, I think I might get this. This sounds interesting. It's different from my usual reads. Which that's what's great about that used bookstore is, yeah, I'm a little disappointed that the YA fantasy section is small. The fantasy section is small, period. But because they got a lot of mysteries there and a lot of literary fiction there. The older stuff. Classics, like I probably wouldn't find the stuff that's on the long list, the Women's Prize long list. I probably wouldn't find those there. But if they came out the year before, if they've already come out and they've been out for a year or whatever, then I might find them there. Like because people donate books there. And I'm thinking, I'm like, why would you donate this beautiful book? Why would you get rid of it? But then I do the same thing too. So. And I'm helping them out because I'm donating I've donated some of my YA fantasy. So, anyway, so that was number 5. That was the last one. So, what are your top 5 favorite mashups that you like to see in books? So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. Alright, thank you. Bye. Okay.